What is up, y'all? It's your boy Aniki. Things are heating up in the manga, and I'm coming at you with this latest video on My Hero Academia Chapter 351, focusing on our favorite battle of the brothers. Now, as always, this is basically a page-by-page breakdown, so expect it to get kind of extensive, but hey, I'm gonna get right into it. So, when we open up with this, I'm gonna read this part just because it's important to note that Endeavor has a hard established legacy. Ultimate move, Flashfire Fist. It builds up internal heat to the maximum threshold before unleashing it as an attack. It's the peak manifestation of fire achieved by a young Endeavor. Excerpt from the Hero Almanac. Now, the thing about this is that the phrase peak manifestation of fire says to me that Endeavor's fire usage is legitimately something that, even though they make it a point to say that he is the first in #1 hero in Japan versus All Might's #1 in the world, this seems to me to be indicating that Endeavor is considered the best fire user, or has achieved a level of fire usage that has not been replicated by other fire quirk users in the world of My Hero Academia, for this to be especially worthy of that footnote in the Hero's Almanac. When Endeavor mastered this move in his quest for power, he came to understand his own limitations, and that fire produces a shimmering haze that warps and distorts all that he gazed upon. And I think that's a really nice way to take something simple like heat waves and the concept of like how fire causes the air to distort, and it can lead to the light refracting differently, distorting how you see the world itself quite literally, or like when you see mirages due to the sky reflecting off of refracting off of hot air, and then that's how it looks like there's like a puddle like far away, like those mirages. That's what that is. It's like a trick of light refracting and bouncing around through the air, and because it's so hot or whatever. So kind of just playing into that actual science behind like the way heat impacts the world around you. So just cool details on Hori's part, sticking to that science nerd beat that he always is on. So and now Dabi, like what I like about this is that yes, Dabi's telling them stuff, but we're clearly staying in the moment. We're not skipping a bunch of scenes. This is all meant to be like together and flow. And, you know, as he's talking to Shoto, telling him straight up, like, look, I'll be fine burning you even though Dad's not here. And it's worth noting that, like, Dabi accepting that Endeavor isn't going to be here and still being like, well, I have a way of getting this revenge. And it's worth noting that we know that he's prepared for his funeral. Him knowing that Endeavor put together this fire agency and sought out other fire users seems to suggest to me that he believes that if he dies in a way, even if Endeavor lives, it will cause him substantial pain to have lost Toya all over again. And not only that, but if he can successfully take away Shoto too, then he takes away his father's dreams, he takes away everything all in one blow, and he doesn't actually need to confront Endeavor to achieve what he wants in breaking him, outside of if he wants to directly be the one responsible for his death. But if he takes the alternative of breaking Endeavor's will as the final goal, then this is actually a much better circumstance for his plan. And he even goes on to make sure and clarify that he does have personal feelings towards Shoto and give him this time, kind of talking about all the ways that, thinking back on how he was turning up the firepower, how it's damaged his body, but how that also led to him being able to train. Now, Dabi asking him if he's a fan of All Might, which we know Shoto is a fan of All Might. That is who he was looking at on the screen when Ray asked him about like the kind of heroes he likes and if he still wanted to be a hero. I think it's worth noting that there's that dichotomy between the two where Shoto wanted to be like All Might and Dabi, because of Endeavor, wanted to surpass him, and that you have this same question, do you want to be a hero though, coming from Rei to her sons, and the different impact and the way and perspectives on that question that these characters have when being hit with this question from her. Especially because Rei herself had already made it clear she had rejected the dream of being a hero for Dabi anyway, or even using his quirk like that. But what we get out of this is Dabi using the best and most powerful Hell Spider we have seen in the entire series, kind of emphasizing that his firepower being so much greater. When you compare the ability, the amount of Flashfire and the size of the Flashfire attacks that Endeavor has with his Hell Spider, even back during the War arc, where Shigaraki was dodging and weaving, and you compare that to the Hell Spider that Dabi is generating here, it is clear which one is the superior attack. And to the extent that it basically works as a pretty good deterrent in zoning, damaging multiple ears and almost cooking a Nomu too. And I kind of wonder if this particular Hell Spider had actually hit the Nomu in the head, would that have been enough to one-shot it right there? Because I'm actually kind of wagering that it might have been. Now, it's worth noting that Shoto was essentially prepping this attack the entire time he's standing there. And so you see he's been holding his hands both right there, charging up this whole time. We had already gotten, a bit of foreshadowing with this back when we saw Bakugo and Deku training together, and he was standing there doing that pose. And I do think it's kind of nice that we see this glow coming from between his hands. It reminds me a lot of All Might passing on All One for All, and when he had that nice glowing palm and kind of just doing that whole thing where he was explaining that he can pass on the quirk. And that they were operating as a genuine front line and successfully managed to deflect the Hell Spider blast that came towards them or put up fire that seemed capable of helping them. It's worth noting that it seems like Burning herself is actually grabbing tendrils of the flames with her bare hands while also headbutting it with her hair. And same with Onigumo, and of course we know that Kido redirects things. But what we get out of here is a nice speed feat from Dabi, throwing out the Hell Spiders and then immediately whipping around. And if you remember season 2, they added in those bonus scenes of Endeavor where he rescues that civilian from the Nomu and he hits the pavement, and then as he hits the pavement, as he's landing with the heat, he ends up melting the street and he kind of slides forward. Seeing that in motion, like if he's using fire to move quickly, then he's also going to melt the ground as he's going there. I like this detail. It's a small one, but it's one that often gets left out when like people use fire powers. They don't necessarily emphasize like, oh yeah, like it's gonna melt the concrete and stuff like that, and especially on this caliber. So and then Dabi punches him. And the thing about this is that a lot of us were ready for Dabi to drop huge blasts, do giant fire AoEs, big blast. But the fact that while yes, he is technically still using fire to do this attack, and this is like a Flashfire fist, when you look at the attack itself, because Hori gives you that close-up to the blow, it is still a direct actual punch into the face, and then that fires off an extremely powerful blast. And it's worth noting that like the thing that I love about the way Dabi's kind of been drawn is that his fire and the way his attacks have been launched off very much remind me of Dragon Ball Z. It's like a power-up aura, and when he punches Shoto, it actually looks more like kind of a ki blast, like a classic Kamehameha wave, especially when you think about the fact that this is blue, so that's immediately how my brain kind of perceives these attacks on him. Now, he's also kind of talking to him about how he was willing to hang out with the civilians, all the things that people have to think of him as now. And it's kind of like Endeavor has kind of overshadowed Shoto within his own plot in a lot of ways when they're on screen. A lot of people have now focused more on Endeavor. Endeavor is the one that, especially in online communities, a lot of discourse like surrounds him, and a lot of people just really loving him. And Shoto's kind of taking a backseat in a lot of ways. And so when Dabi is kind of calling Shoto this puppet, this pawn, and all these other things, it does kind of echo some of the things and criticisms you see against this character, is that he doesn't seem to want to do these things enough. But he himself is emphasizing that this desire to go against Dabi is partially born out of his desire to save him, and the idea and him chasing after this idea of fixing or hopefully stopping his brother at least from going any further and becoming a bigger blight on society and ultimately their family, causing their mother more pain and their siblings more regret at seeing the way he's turned out. So when Dabi calls him the boy born with everything, it's a reference to him having what's considered the perfect quirk to Endeavor, him having a rich father, a great education. He has every opportunity. He has an ample amount of opportunity presented to him. And this is kind of even echoes back to what, if you think back to it, what like Deku was kind of saying to him at the sports festival when he was half baked, half trying, to say that he, and when Deku straight up says, you don't deserve to win if you're not going to go all out. You don't deserve to win if you're not going to do your best. And this half-baked approach, so when Shoto says you're not wrong about me, and that he took the long way around, and he's full of all this doubt, and he's a half-baked dummy, he's talking about his lack of commitment, the fact that he did, not really commit to his power, didn't fully accept himself for a really long time, and so he wasn't up to par with the mastery he needed to have for both sides of his ability or both parts of his quirk. He wasn't at balance with himself, and so yeah, he was half finished. But now we're getting to that point with that completion and understanding of his quirk. And so also the jet burn into the building, I do want to take the moment to acknowledge the art again, with it, instead of it being like just oh yeah, I'm gonna have him fly into the building and have it be like he just crashes in. Nope. Again, applying that heat physics, making sure to include the glass cracking and bubbling and melting and warping, quickly changing as if it would be like if you were going to blow glass, while simultaneously, because of what we end up seeing with the steam and the letting us know that Dabi's arm had been cooled before we even get to it. And he's like, you're not wrong about me, and he says he neutralized the heat. And now it's worth noting that the pose and stance that Shoto has been taking throughout the entire time to prep this attack has been similar to the 0-point breakthrough in Katekyo Hitman Reborn, with we see it's such an emphasis on fire, but it seems to be about neutralizing the heat. The 0-point breakthrough was specifically a technique that the Bongola flames used to neutralize the dying will flames of other opponents. So, and now we see that Shoto does acknowledge that he kind of is like, okay, I'm glad to know that you've been observing me too. We've been paying attention to each other. We as brothers can see each other is kind of what's going on when in here. And he's like, I turned Flashfire into something more. Now it's made to stop you. And it's kind of like that idea that I've been focused on you way more than I've been focused on Endeavor. And it's good to know that you've been at least somewhat focused on me. Now, we see that there was actually a flashback, and in this flashback, we see Mina kind of yelling at Sero and Kaminari, and I cannot stress this enough. Mina going from the jokester and somebody who was largely used for comedic relief and fun in the first act and the second act especially, to and was somebody who was painted as extremely optimistic even going into the PLW arc. And then only for us to turn around and have her being this giant scold and somebody who was consistently reprimanding and crying and worried and stressed throughout the entirety of the final arc is a good way to keep us grounded and knowing that everybody hasn't totally recovered and they have changed in certain ways after the result of that war, and she's one of the people more heavily impacted in a more visible way. So now, as they plan out all this stuff, I want to note the highlight between the resentment between Shoto and Dabi and what they had and how this was always set up, and how you kind of get that parallel picture of them both looking down, and it's just kind of a reminder to Shoto when he first began at UA, and a similar age in Toya back when he would have been young, but what he would have looked like at Shoto's age, I believe, if he had not been injured, because this does look like he'd be slightly older than the previous depictions of Toya that we've actually gotten to see. So what is extremely important here is that Shoto does what a lot of us have done, but what some people within our fandom haven't, which is he's acknowledging something really important. And it's something that, you see all these jokes on Twitter about, oh, I'm literally a neurodivergent and a minor, so it's fine. But it's like that principle right here is what Shoto is kind of calling out, where he's like, yes, you went through traumatic things, our family is messed up, but you made the active decision to take your trauma and apply it to other people and harm them. And that goes beyond everybody else. You do not get to put that on our dad. That is your responsibility, and you're not going to take any more innocent people's lives. So if you have problems with us, you take that out with us. That is our problem. And now I want to highlight a couple of things, especially with these last pages. Phosphorus is supposed to be like, they want to react to different elements. Basically, this is the kind of stuff that you use for light bulbs, all kinds of stuff. So it's usually centered more around light. But I'm guessing that this move specifically involves some kind of reaction between the ice on his right side that he typically, and the flames that he has crossing over into it. And it's worth noting that most of the time Dabi or Shoto uses his fire, he had been using it with his left hand because it was associated with his left side. This is the thing that made him like Dabi and Endeavor from the standpoint of Endeavor seems to be left-handed. He primarily, like, he does a lot of moves with his left hand. That's when the first time we see Flashfire Fist. The first time we see Dabi use his flames, it's a left hand attack too. So we have this emphasis on the left with him switching the fire over to the right. One, it implies, it highlights the combination that is his parents' powers and his like between the two sides, but then it also sets him apart from those two, from it being about the left. In fact, let me double check this while I'm looking at this, which I think the first punch was also a left. So yeah, I'm looking at it. The opening shot was a left hook from Dabi, the classic left open of the Todoroki family. So with him switching to his right, you kind of have the classic move of him opening with his right side, but he's actually using fire. And even the final attack doesn't look just like fire. It looks to seem like there's some of that ice involved. And there were some pretty bad scans back in the day that claimed that Shoto was able to put fire in his ice. So it's kind of nice to see that the bad scan people, while wrong, ultimately, hey, you were just a little ahead of your time. So, and this development of where you see the fire across his chest like an X, I'm wondering if that's going to be like the equivalent of his, kind of like how Endeavor always has that mask active, if that's going to be like Shoto's thing. We know, we've seen all the steam. We know that he has like that vest that's supposed to counterbalance the downsides to his quirk. But at the same time, the more he develops, maybe that support item isn't really going to be necessary. If he's able to completely like switch his fire over to the right side, then in theory he can switch his ice over to the left, which means he can continuously move and control his flames and ice at will, which means he should be able to pretty heavily or pretty reliably regulate himself at this point. But who knows? Especially with where we're at in the series, it would be okay if he still needed some stuff. Shout out to Horikoshi for still drawing some of those, those canisters, those weenies, making sure to keep that in mind. All around, good chapter. We are going on a 3-week break. Well, I guess before I completely buckle away from that, I do also want to highlight and appreciate the through line from sports festival to joint training to Endeavor agency to where we are now with Shoto actually really having to come up with ways to get around his weaknesses, from his habits to the overall hand-to-hand combat weakness. And because that's one of the things that Deku and Bakugo were way better than him at, especially by joint training when Tetsu kind of made him look a little silly there. So getting all that fixed, and him actually having worked on this and applying himself and growing, really paying off in working on the weaknesses that we as readers have pointed out within his character, his fighting style, really do appreciate that. So I enjoyed this chapter. I hope you did too. I will hopefully see you sooner than in 3 weeks. I will be on Anime Lately. I was on Anime Lately today too. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and hope you've been enjoying My Hero Academia. And this 3-week break isn't too bad on us. So that's all I'm going to say about this. I'm Aniki and I'm out. Also, have a churro.